Hello everyone, welcome to GoTarryn TV. This is Dr. T, PhD, the Prodigy of Sports Psychology, welcoming you to the second episode of this 6-week playlist right here on my channel. And I'm so happy you can join us. And before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to ask everyone out there, if you please be so kind as to like this video, leave us a comment, and share it with all of your friends and family out there. Now, as you know, as part of this 6-week psychological series, we are delving into how exercise is medicine for seniors. And again, not only for seniors, but it doesn't matter what age category we are, because as I mentioned last week, we are all in common that we are aging every day, and the goal is to age healthier. And that's why I wanted to present to you my second installment of this 6-week series. And this is a presentation that I provided to Fayette Senior Services in Fayetteville, Georgia, last June in 2023, talking about overcoming your mental relationship with food. That's right, the food fight of food addiction. That's what we're going to talk about today. So it's going to be very exciting to jump back into time, take a look at last summer as I presented to the Fayette Senior Services of how they can definitely win this battle of the food fight. So I invite you to check that out here momentarily. And in the meantime, I wanted to remind everyone out there that with GoTarryn Health and Fitness, it's your time, it's your investment, it's your life. We'll be right back. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, how are y'all doing? Good, thank you. Have I met anybody in here before at the March seminar in Peachtree City? So everybody's new. Okay, welcome. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. So before we start, my name's Taryn, the traveling trainer, and I'm a doctor of exercise psychology. Today, I'm going to prescribe food psychology to everybody. So a couple of housekeeping things first. Can everybody hear me okay? Let me know if I need to speak up, please, or slow down. I'm going to be going off the presentation today. And today, as you know, the title is called Overcoming Your Mental Relationship with Food, aka the food fight, right? That's the big challenge, because I wanted to start out and tell you a quick story about myself so you can kind of both know who I am and also why we're here talking about this, what brought us to discuss this today. So about 22 years ago, roughly, in the year 2001, I was right up the street. Is everybody familiar with Fayetteville, sort of? On Highway 85, there's a Waffle House. There's one of the oldest ones, Unit 362. I used to manage it when I was a little kid right out of college. And that was one of the first jobs I had. And one of the first impressions I had with how unhealthy we eat in this country, right? Everybody knows that that's one thing that if we can change is our American diet, especially the restaurants that we consume and we go to. But even in our homes or the grocery stores, right? There's a lot of different options of how we can eat and adjust that and change, because we're going to talk a lot about behavior change, because behavior change is psychology. And that's when I first learned the problems that we had here in America, but especially the Southeast as well, too. From there, the good news is, after I finished working at Waffle House, I actually excelled and made it to Golden Corral. So that was my next venture. Yes, I was an assistant manager. I was promoted to an assistant manager at Golden Corral, the buffet restaurant chain. Anybody in this room ever been to Golden Corral? We know about it? Okay, so we know we've set the baseline now of what we're going to discuss, right? And if you have any questions for the next, say, 40, 45 minutes as we're discussing, I'm going to leave about 10, 15 minutes at the end for some Q&A, so that way we can address everything and have clarity with everything that we cover today. Again, as I mentioned, I'm not going to try to go too fast because I want the information to really sink in, because the problem is, for all of us growing up in elementary school and academia, we were taught, you know, the wrong ways pretty much. And plus, if you Google search right now how many different diets there are, about 100,000 different ones are going to come up. Well, which one's correct? Which one's right? Which one should you stay away from? Hopefully, we're going to be able to address some of those, but also tie that in, how that connects with up here, our psychology of the mental game, the fight that we have with this, okay? Because in my field of the health and fitness industry, I've been in it for 20 years, just about after I got done with the mess in the restaurant industry. and I realized what I really wanted to do for a living. I learned that intrinsic motivation is very important, internalizing what we can do in ourselves. And again, we'll learn a lot about that today. But the big problem that we have in this country, we know that if we look at the statistics for the last several decades, we've been hovering around 2/3 of all of us in this country being overweight. And the bigger problem than that is morbid obesity, because the statistics, which we'll take a look at in a slide here, have shown that those have increased almost 500% in the last 60 years. We'll see an exact slide on what I'm talking about. But the problem of obesity is that it's become labeled as an epidemic now. It is a medical condition. So in other words, we can go to our medical doctor and to the hospital and have a diagnosis of being morbidly obese, meaning we have what's called a body mass index of over 25%. So we know, again, over the years, let's take me for example, when I grew up in school, I was taught something called the food pyramid. We know about the food pyramid, right? In the base, you have your big complex carbs and starches and everything else. And then sometime after that, when I went into college, it got flipped upside down. I said, I've been doing this the wrong way. We actually should have had it this way, and we really need to stay away from those carbs. You should eat just nothing but fats and proteins, right? The Atkins diet is what I'm talking about. And then that changed. And no, that's wrong. And you know, everybody was just driven nuts and crazy. Well, hopefully what I'm going to try to do is make it as succinct and kind of simplified as possible with my conclusion when we get to the end. Because what I want to do is provide you the 3 big concepts of how we can fix this. If there's 3 things at the end of this presentation, that's what I'm going to end and conclude with, because my goal is that when we walk out of here, we'll say, I can remember that. I know those 3 things that Taryn was talking about, and you can do it too. There's going to be goal settings. What caused the obesity? Again, you see the list up here, you know, in terms of what has happened over the years in this country. As we've talked about, macronutrients, we know the big ones are you have your fats, proteins, and carbs. Those are the macronutrients to have in a day of eating. And that's where this has all been marred and confused. Because again, if I ask each and every one of you in the room, you could probably go and tell me one different diet that you know of that either yourself or someone else may have been on, right? And that are still out there, because again, the food industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, right? When you turn on the television, how many commercials do you see that has to do something with food, supplements, vitamins, etc.? We have the latest body fat pill that can make you lose weight. To combat obesity, anybody in here seen the commercials of Manjaro and Ozempic? And I have several, I do personal training for a living full time. I have many clients that have actually been on that and have you know, fallen into this kind of trap that we're seeing in this country. Because again, in my opinion, the problem that we have is the marketing that we're being fed. I'm not going to get political or controversial with talking about either side on what we're being force-fed, no pun intended. But what we've seen is that from the Food and Drug Administration, they have an agenda, and I do believe part of that is to get everyone to eat healthier. I do believe that, but I don't think that's everything. I think there's other issues that, let me give you a good example. Everyone can relate to this one. The medical doctors are getting better on this now, because you used to go to the medical doctor and say, I've got an ailment. Oh, okay, well, let's give you a pill to fix that. Let's give you a drug. Let's put you in surgery. We'll get rid of that fat. Well, why not instead we reverse that and do some preventative maintenance to combat this? Before this happens, let's eat better, right? Let's sleep better. Let's assess and see how our exercise regimen is. Are we getting enough physical activity? They say that sedentary is a big problem here in this country, and that sitting is the absolute new smoking for today. It is a killer. It's kind of ironic that y'all are sitting right now, and that I thought about it. I was going to have you run in place or do jumping jacks. But I thought from a liability purpose, I asked her, I said, is that okay? And she said, no, you have to let them. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. But laughing's good, because laughing, we're burning calories, as you know. A lot of this list, again, we can relate to. Again, let's just take some of the other things, some of the things that you can't control, this last line item right here. While there are a lot of controllable variables, there are stuff that we can't do. We were born a certain gender, a certain height, weight, predisposition of how our metabolism is, how our blood pressure and our heart rate, cholesterol, you name it. So having said that, that does account for a very small margin, because, for example, you've always seen the person that can eat donuts and pizza and they look the same. They never put on a weight. And then you're thinking, well, gosh, I look at a piece of cake and I've gained 3 ounces, right? That's the whole thing about the genetics. But again, what can we change? Behavior modification goes back to that. That's what we're talking about today. So when you take a look at the list in terms of, well, what else has, I mentioned the marketing of what's going on, what we're being kind of exposed to in the US and in Atlanta and so forth. Well, the problem is when you drive on Highway 85, I mentioned Waffle House. If I asked everybody in this room right now, show of hands, do you think you can, and you don't have to tell me or shout it out, but anybody can think of a restaurant, fast food that comes right off the top of your head down the street? You don't have to name it, but just raise your hand if you could think of one. Yeah, right? I heard, yeah, a few of them. And so here's the issue with that. If I asked you, where's a healthy restaurant you can go to for sure that you can go in that does well with the macronutrients and might even do well with helping you with some of the other, components, well, that probably would be harder to raise that hand and be like, oh, let's see. And that's the issue. I have 3 children. I have 3 little kids and a wife at home. And my 3 kids always, constantly, do you think they ask me, Dad, can we go to a healthy restaurant today and eat a nice salad with fresh fruits and vegetables? I never hear them say that. That'd be like the Twilight Zone. What I hear is what? McDonald's, yes, number 1. McDonald's is always number 1. We want to go to McDonald's. Why? Well, because the food, it tastes good, right? It definitely has the starches and the fats and everything they love. It comes with a toy, with their Happy Meal. It has the big playground for them. It's convenient for me because it has Wi-Fi. I can go there. I could be on my phone or computer, and they can go do their thing. That's not healthy. That's not what I should be doing. Unfortunately, that is what the majority of us as Americans do, right? That's the problem. And so the issue with that is, what can we do to change that? And that's what, again, when we finish this and wrap it up, we want to have a little discussion on what we're learning right now, what we can do to change. We're also going to jump into the psychology, which is, again, the big point of this whole project here that we're doing, why we're meeting, to talk about some of these issues that we're seeing. But take a look at this chart right here, very, very recent chart. If you can see it, this is, as I mentioned, roughly 60 years ago, we had a problem of almost 11% obesity in this country, right? Big problem. Well, you jump that up to now, projected within the next 10 years, say, if things keep going this way, we are at 40% right now of obesity. That's where we're at in this country. We're at 40% according to the most recent studies of all of the statistics and empirical research that has gathered data on what the obesity epidemic problem is. Why? That doesn't make any sense. How is that possible? I mean, how could this be any way possible in terms of, in our lifetime, we know that we're smarter, right? More research is being done. I mentioned, if you Google search, there's 1 million diets out there, 100,000 roughly on Google. And how many books do they have on how you can lose weight fast, right? So that doesn't make any sense. This doesn't correlate. It should be the opposite, you would think, or at the very least, just stay the same. We should be able to maintain it. Well, there's other issues going on. There's a really good book called The Hungry Brain. One of my colleagues just told me about this. And I would invite you to check that out, because that book covers that answer of why, in terms, and again, it's called The Hungry Brain. Good book that goes over instinctively over time what's happened to us. Why do we crave, if I had a big plate of chocolate chip fresh baked cookies that were just out of the oven about an hour ago right here, and then if I had a big plate of some vegetables with carrots and celery and tomato, hey, I'll be the first to admit, if I came in here and I saw those 2 options, I'd be sitting over here because that would be more attractive. That, especially if I'm hungry, too, by the way. If I'm hungry and I haven't eaten anything, our brains, since caveman days and in the ancient times, have been wired to chase after starches, fats, and sugars. We weren't taught to think about, well, how about this other plate over here with the healthier items that we could be eating? And that's the issue that we're talking about, right? Show of hands. Do you believe that food can be an addiction? Is there such a thing as food addiction? I didn't see anybody not raise their hands. It absolutely is, right? We know that. We probably know people that are. We've probably seen them in life. We have family members or friends that we've dealt with that suffer from food addiction. It's a real problem. And I'm not going to make light of that at all, because with food addiction, that is one of the issues that, as I mentioned before, yes, it is a medical issue at this point with obesity, if it leads to morbid obesity especially. And if it does, that's where we need to talk to a registered dietitian, a counselor, support group, behavioral therapist, but especially getting coping help with other people that can relate to us and have that same issue or been to that problem. So if you have a friend or a family member you're thinking of and you want them to get help, there is research out, there's plenty of sources, especially some that are even free, that can help with that, with counseling. And, with the importance of Exercise, of course, which we'll touch a little bit today because that's just as important. But again, when it comes to food addiction, yeah, again, this is no different, in my opinion, than if someone's addicted to cocaine, if someone's addicted to coffee like I am, unfortunately, like someone's addicted to candy like my kids or McDonald's. It's a circular, vicious pattern because when you're addicted to, say, food, it doesn't necessarily have to be because you're hungry. It could just be because you're used to it, like we all are. In family gatherings, right? Think about anything in life. Weddings, funerals, get-togethers, social events, even, I'm not going to pick on this place, of course, but, or just any place that you get a gathering of people together to celebrate, it's usually food, right? Or to mourn, or to grieve, or what have you. Food is usually what brings people together because, again, that's which is fine, that's okay. My issue with it is that it's the food that we have usually. You don't really see the lettuce wraps and the healthier fruits and cut up and all that. What we usually see is the easier stuff. You know, it's so easy to just go down to Dunkin' Donuts right over here and just pick that up and put it right here, right? I mean, that's so simple. And so with the addiction, that feeds that craving of those people who suffer with addiction. Again, cell phone addiction. Do we have that today? For sure, right? Absolutely. You see it. It's unfortunate. You go to the restaurants, you see a family of four, they've put their order in. What's the next thing that they all look like they do? They're like this, right? Yeah, looking at their phone. Even the kids, too. I mean, it's sick. And so that's a problem. So the addiction, though, can be cured. And again, I mentioned earlier about the pattern, the behavioral change, right? That it's a circular, vicious problem. And that's something that can be addressed because, again, we know that there's physical components that are effects directly resulting from food addiction and food, overeating on this left side. We've seen it all, you know, and when we know that information, why would we eat unhealthy when we know that it could lead to some problems in our life? Rather, if we know the information, well, if I eat healthy and if I throw in some micronutrients, right, such as vitamins and minerals and fiber and such, then I know that I can avoid some of these things, right? The medical doctors are getting better on that. There's one called Dr. Peter Attea, who I'll also reference up here. You'll see him in just a few minutes, that does a wonderful job on it. And I recently discovered him because he really points out, and he's a medical doctor, by the way, in terms of working with people that he prescribes them, eat healthy first. Let me take a look at what you're eating before I even look at what I want to, if I need to put you on any medication like blood pressure reduction, cholesterol, what have you. But again, for today's purposes, I really wanted to focus on this side of the issue that we have. It's a mental issue. It's a mental problem. You know, there's times when people get distressed and it leads to major stress. And even young people, young adolescents, you know, it's a big problem when they have an issue arise. Usually food is something that could be comfort to them, right? I mentioned Waffle House earlier. We had the regulars come in. You know what I'm talking about. Those are the people that every single day came in, ordered the same exact thing. You knew them like clockwork. And I'm not making this up, I promise, after 20 years, I remember this. I had cooks that worked for me that when they would look at the parking lot, you can guess, exactly, you knew what I was going to say. They would already have the food ready, have it on the table, and then the people would walk in, and they'd be really happy. At Golden Corral, for those of you who don't know, that's an all-you-can-eat buffet with every single food you could think of on the planet. And when the people would come in, it is like a corral. I would see people just warm their hands and just get ready, and then they would just go. And unfortunately, what I learned as a manager under my direct supervisors above me was their goal wasn't to get the people healthy, right? Of course not. Their goal was, right, profit. And that's what I was taught from a very young age. To a degree, I consider myself a salesman because, as I mentioned, I'm a personal trainer. I was taught in the food industry that my number one goal and achievement in life was to get as much money from the customers that walked into our restaurant as possible. That was above all else, way above. There was no close second. Okay, and then it was like, well, let's focus on good customer service. Let's have good, clean bathrooms. Let's make sure the food is safe so that we don't get an inspection, what have you. So everything else fell under the money. Follow the money, right? And we all know that. I mean, again, we can see that with today's FDAs. And that's why, again, not to go off a tangent here, but you hear about, I showed you the statistics of the morbid obesity increase, but, you know, cancer's gone way up. Cardiovascular disease, number one disease deaths, in America by far. It always has been. And everything relates back to what we're eating. Because if you look at the last 50, 60 years since the Industrial Revolution, when you look at how the way we've been eating, what's happened? There's been a few things. One, with the plates, they've gone from here to about right here. The cups, even the extra large cups now are like, look like, right? Yeah, exactly. Supersized is another. You've also seen what else? Again, Roundup, pesticides, growth hormones, GMOs and such. The way that the food's processed, the preservatives. So that's why one of the tricks that whenever I'm working with clients and they ask me, what's the best thing when I go to a grocery store? I just tell them real quick, you probably heard this before. I just tell them, avoid the middle aisles and walk around the perimeter of the grocery store, because that's where you're going to go around to the vegetables, the produce, the dairy, etc. You know, that's where you're going to stay away from those aisles with all the box cans and such, like as much as possible, at least, to mitigate it. But again, the problem that we have before us is that psychologically, it's an issue that people keep getting stuck in this vicious cycle. And it's no joke, really. I mean, the suicide has gone up. With the last 3 years, since March 2020, we had something known as COVID-19 with the pandemic, and there's nobody in this room who was unaffected by that in some way, right? You heard the COVID-19 pounds that people got, or the corn 10 pounds that people added on during. Why? Because they were stuck at home, being isolated, and some people got depressed, bored, and anxious, and stressed out. So what did we do? We eat, or we drink, right? The alcohol problem, that's another issue that's been something prevalent. One of the quick, easy ways that is, to me, it's simple. To my clients, what I tell them is, one of the best things you can do effectively at home is not to have it in the house. Because if it's not at home, you're not going to be affected by it. So you can't change that. You can't lose. So if I know one of my clients is dealing with alcohol and they can't stop drinking, I just tell them, I'm like, you can't keep that in the home. There's no gray area on this. There's no like, well, if I just have a little sip. No, that doesn't work. And it doesn't have to be an alcoholic. But that's the point that leads to that addiction in any case. You just insert whatever into the alcohol. It could be a brownie. It could be whatever that trigger food is. So if we know what is the trigger food that I think of that drives me nuts, I really want, just don't keep it in the home, because then that's a big victory. You've already won in that case. When you go out to eat at a restaurant, as I mentioned, I'm not saying to stay away from all restaurants, but when you do go, just keep in mind the restaurant's #1 priority, besides making money, is to have you come back because it tastes so good. How does it taste so good? What do? They throw in right, exactly. You name it. All of that. Butter, sugar, everything that tastes good. So we don't know what they're doing to prepare it in the kitchen. Well, we do know in Waffle House, you see them, but you see the lard that they're pouring on there, the bacon grease, everything, right? So why would we do that in the first place? So that's kind of the psychology of it that we'll take a look at. I mentioned earlier about that cycle that happens. And again, what's going on is, again, we have an event that triggers that craving. It works into our brain. And it turns into the dopamine that releases into the anticipation of going into that temptation of serotonin released. And then finally, we just can't avoid that ice cream or what have you. Again, it just becomes a bad habit. And then when we do that, we just, again, repeat it. It just keeps going constantly over and over and over. And it's unfortunate, but we can combat that. There's a few things up here that say that what we could do. What are some simple things? Well, those sugary snacks, replace them with protein-rich foods. So for example, light string cheese, Greek yogurt, raw almonds. There are ways to do this. Potatoes, I mean, those are fine. I'm not totally against carbs. Again, it's not an evil word. It has become negative stigmatism, with people in terms of nutrition. But there's ways that we can do this. You can stay consistent with, again, healthy neural pathways. That's what it's going to promote. So consistency will keep you, on that, being able to just be derailed or have a hiccup here and there. Because again, it's not saying that you can totally avoid bad foods. In fact, I would say be careful. Don't put a negative connotation on desserts or sugary foods, because that's where the problem lies. If we say that it's the enemy, then it does become a fight, right, in between us. We don't need that. We just make healthier choices. And then finally, if we get enough sleep, that's really, really important. It's very, very crucial. Not enough people getting sleep, and good sleep. What I mean by that is the deep REM sleep too. So there are ways, and again, I mentioned exercise a few minutes ago. Exercise promotes everything on there. The more you exercise, your faster metabolism will be, everything, all of your vitals are going to go healthier. and that'll help with those cravings as well. You're going to feel like you want something healthier in the first place. And vice versa too. When you exercise, you get the benefits of weight loss and feeling better, and just, again, neurologically, you're going to just have more brain optimization is what they say. You know, there's more studies that are coming back, in fact, and the data and research will show that when you eat healthy, brain function, cognitively, you'll be better off. So in other words, as a general, when you look at it at a graph, more people who are healthy and who stay to a healthier diet are going to not only live longer, be healthier, but in the long term, they're going to be out of pain, and they're also going to be enjoying life too. Because, you know, okay, well, if I was told I could live up to 100 years old, but I'm going to be in constant pain and misery, suffering because I don't eat good, what good would that do, right? The point is to live healthy longer so that way we can enjoy life, because we're not hurting, we don't have inflammation from bad food, and we're not having bad habits like drinking alcohol and eating, you know, starches and everything else that we should be avoiding. There's a list here in terms of the thinking about food, what we can do. Keep in mind, this is a list that's generalized in terms of we have somebody who just, where do I start? Where do I begin? What am I supposed to do? How do I tackle this? Well, if we do some of these things on this list here, you know, you want to take a look and an evaluation, an assessment of kind of looking at how am I doing right now? What can I improve? So when we leave today, you could say, every time I eat, I'm going to add, can I add one more healthy vegetable or fruit to that plate that I'm eating? That would be my challenge to you. To say, okay, I'm going to eat some meal, but Taryn challenged me. I got my regular meal that I'm normally going to eat, but I'm going to add one more piece of fruit or vegetable to that plate that I have that I normally wouldn't. And then on the flip side, you can also say, well, I've got this ritual that every such and such time that I'm supposed to, you know, get together with family, and they have cupcakes and birthdays, what have you. I'm going to do better on the next birthday that we have. And again, you don't have to go cold turkey. You don't have to say, no slice of cake for me. Just tell them I want a small piece, no bigger than my thumb, you know. Because again, the other problem that we have, and you know this, is the portion sizes, the portion control. The serving sizes, as I mentioned, used to be a lot smaller. Now they're a lot greater because we're America. We want to be big, and we want to be the best and have the most and consume the greatest amount. And we want to be supersized. Another good film, if you have Super Size Me, about the McDonald's story of what happens when you eat that every day. In terms of, so when you look at what portions are, when they say, well, what is a serving? A serving is the size of our own fist. So my fist might be a little bigger than most everybody's in here. So when you look at your fist, you're like, okay, that is one serving size. That's the size of, say, an apple or a bowl of blueberries or, you know, some carrots. You just want to take into account, like, what would be a serving size of what I can eat. If it's something healthier, then your quantity can go up. We'll talk about that a little bit in just a second, too. We'll also address some questions of, well, you know, again, in America, everybody, for the most part, the American diet, right now, currently, they do these three things. They eat what they want, they eat it when they want to, and they also eat it at any time that they want to. And those are the ones that we're going to tackle in terms of looking at what the three critical areas of how we can fix that. Because we'll jump into that and what that looks like in a second, but what we want to do is, and you've heard this as well too, should I go on a diet? Well, okay, not to pick on diets. There are some good ones. In fact, at the end, we'll take a look at 5 of them that are arguably the best ones if you're thinking of going on one when we conclude. But keep in mind, the word diet implies temporary, right? When you look at the word diet, it sounds like something that you're going to be doing for a given amount of time, and then it's going to be terminal at one point where you can stop doing it. Well, my challenge to everybody, and here's what I said a few minutes ago, is that from now on, the rest of your life, you do this as a lifestyle for your longevity because, again, you want to be living healthy and feeling better and less stressed, sleeping better, and not dealing with issues like inflammation. Such a way to do that is to eat better and to challenge yourself to changing your lifestyle, to being healthier. And then the rest of the components go along with that as well too. You saw it a few slides ago, can I drink more water? That's another thing that most people don't get enough of. 70% of our bodies are made of water, and that's important to keep rehydrating. There's a reason why most of our bodies are comprised of water. And for water's sake, you hear, how much water should I have? One rule of thumb, what I tell people is the whole adage of 8 glasses, 8-ounce water a day is good. But to get real specific, since we're all different, we all have different blood types and such, if you took your body weight and you cut it in half, that's the amount of ounces, whatever that number is, that you should be drinking. So for example, let's use me for example. I'm about 180 pounds right now. Then if I cut that number in half, I should be drinking roughly 90 ounces of water a day for healthy promotion. Most people don't get close to that number wherever we're at. And then when they go, well, I had some sweet tea earlier, doesn't that count, or doesn't the coffee count? It actually doesn't. Not only that, but a step further, it takes away, it's a negative because those are diuretics. So that actually dehydrates us. So if I drink a cup of, well, I mentioned, I like coffee. If I drink a cup, I should be looking at that saying, okay, now I'm -1 already for the day in the morning. I need to have 2 8-ounce glasses of water just to make sure that that counts as 1, that I've made up for that in terms of having enough, to getting enough water during the day. And again, this is good because this goes back to how can we assess ourselves and look at what can I do to improve and goal set of how I can make this better. How can I make myself better? Body image is so important too, self-esteem, because again, when people go to the gym or they're on a weight loss program, not only do they do it for their health, but most of us would do it for looks as well too, because well, let's face it, in my closet, I've got these clothes that are a little smaller. I used to fit in them. That'll be my goal. I'm going to do that. My belt, I used to have this notch right here. I want to lose an inch in my waist so that I can do that again. Because again, that's the reward incentive. You want to have smart goals, and you don't want to do it cold turkey. I'm not telling everybody in here to just stop what you're doing, everything all at once, and then change it transformatively. It won't happen overnight. It doesn't. But you can be aggressive about it. You can say, okay, he's challenged me to do that. What else can I do? And you look at the terms of what else in a day that you can be doing. And again, we'll repeat this because I'm a big believer that repetition is the mode of learning. Again, look at how much consumption in a day you're having. This is how to evaluate it. Again, what time of day are you eating? What does that look like? What's your timing? Are we eating late at night? We know that's not good, right? And also the quality of the food that we're having. What does that look like? Quantity, quality, timing. Those are the 3 to work on. We look at that and we say, okay, let's see. This is how I'm doing right here, and this is what I've been told to work on. There, you could look, and again, I'll illustrate that a little better as we move on in the presentation. So again, there's more strategies that we could be taking a look at. These are great, by the way, too. I mentioned earlier, don't look at food as a negativity. In psychology, in fact, negative punishment is not as good as positive reward. And you've heard this in terms of, again, Pavlovian for dogs. It's not good to slap or hit them on the butt or what have you to get them to change their habits. Most people don't change, including animals, by warnings. We don't. We're more driven and motivated when we see success, when we see positive reinforcement. So for example, when we see, let's use money for a second. Everybody can relate to this, to the money and finances. During the stock crises, when funds and stocks are going down, and there's research on this, by the way, too. People usually don't log in and check their funds. They want to just, ignorance is bliss. I don't want to know. What I don't know won't hurt me. And that's the negative punishment. But when stocks are really good and the market's looking great, you have more people logging in and say, oh, I love that. This is making me feel good. I could see my stocks go. Well, it's, again, no different than how we reward it. We would rather, let's use politics for a second. Whatever political affiliation, if you are, usually you're going to root for your side and you're going to have your channel on and you're going to be wanting to feed what you're internalizing. You don't want to look at the enemy. You're like, they're bad. They're the evil people. We're not going to look at them. We're going to look at us because we're perfect and we're the right way, whichever way that is. And so again, it's the same thing with the psychological benefits of positively rewarding ourselves. So here's an example. Do I say, oh, hey, this is great. I've now done an extra mile of jogging or walking in a week that I've ever done in my life. I'm going to reward myself. I'm going to go to the Dairy Queen up here. No, that's not the point. The point is I'm going to reward myself and fit into my clothes that I used to not be able to and say, oh my goodness, wow, I did lose that inch. That's the rewards. That's the positive benefits of real smart goal setting. That's what we're getting at today on that. So again, it's not scary to eat well. And again, it's not too expensive to do that, by the way, because a lot of times people misconstrue that, well, it's just too expensive to eat healthy. Now, from a socioeconomic issue, that is true in terms of when these fast food restaurants take into account to put their locations, they usually do look at lower income, impoverished areas. And they do that from a marketing and from a sales standpoint. So in that regard, yes, there is some truth, because let's face it, if you go, not to pick on McDonald's, but let's pick a different one, a Burger King, you go there, there's always the cheapest, $1 or $2, whatever menu that you can get, and you can get a burger, fries, and a drink for $5 or whatever it is. And so a lot of times if we're on a budget financially, that's usually the reason why we would think to go to something like that. Or no different than when we're in the grocery store, when we go and we see, oh gosh, inflation, look at the strawberries, apples have gone up. Let me go in down the middle aisles. Oh gosh, look at this. We've got a bag of chips, 2 for $1 at BOGO, Publix. Then it's just, thinking like, well, that's what I'm going to do to save money. And again, we're busy. A lot of times, if you have a busy schedule, that's what we're victims of. I'll admit, I'm a type A person. I classify myself as a very busy person with a busy schedule. And it's so much easier to say, hey, look, I'm in a hurry. I got to rush. I got to go do this thing. I'm just going to go through a drive-through and get something unhealthy. But the way to combat that is to prioritize and organize our timing. That's so important. And we could do that by many different ways. We could say, well, I'm going to sleep an hour earlier tonight. I'm going to challenge myself to go to bed, whatever, 30 minutes earlier. That way I can get up 30 minutes earlier, and that way I can go and be on time wherever I'm trying to go to. Because most effective people that you'll meet are not, they're never late usually. They're usually early. Wherever you're going, those people are motivated because they have a lot of high pride in themselves, and they want to stay consistent with whatever they're doing in life. It's just a unique trait that underlies with a lot of those different types of people in life that we walk in and meet and deal with. So when I was teaching about 6 years ago at Georgia State University, I was teaching a couple of undergraduate classes, and we were going off something called myplate.gov. This is not bad in terms of where we can have a starting point. In fact, what I like about it is that it does keep the carbs in the top right corner of that plate under check. And again, it has half the plate of fruits and vegetables. I love that. I think this is great. This is a terrific way to start in terms of good information. And the reason why dairy is so small, because in the last years and decades, we've found the correlations of inflammation linked with dairy and cow milk. And the way, again, I think strongly it's the way it's pasteurized, homogenized. Because, yeah, you go to a different country or what have you. Right, exactly. There's different countries, by the way, where my wife has celiac disease. She can't have gluten. There's different countries where she can eat stuff that has, quote, gluten in it, but it's manufactured differently. There's countries that don't even have a word for gluten. They don't even know what that means. And here, that's the problem that's happened over the time. But I like this because, again, when I was teaching at Georgia State University, one of my undergraduate classes I had, we focused a lot on nutrition. And this is a good starting point for people to go to. So, again, this is continued from some of the information that they have from their website, which, again, this is all free, by the way. Everything I'm telling you, you can go on the internet, you can go to the website, and they have all this information on just different recipes that you could have. With all different types of ingredients, and if you're thinking of different ideas of cooking and what have you, well, how can I get my, they say 2,000 calorie plan? Well, yeah, that's for the average person. We're all different. Some of us are different sizes, shapes, heights, weights, male versus female. Blood type is important. So in order to figure out and know how we should eat, I always recommend at least one time meeting with a registered dietitian that covers that kind of baseline with you, to say, okay, well, these foods, like for example, I could probably eat something that someone else couldn't. And it goes back to partly genetics. And that's another issue as well. So here's a good kind of info chart that has, this is brought directly from the National Institute of Aging. This tells you, kind of breaking it down with gender. Well, females over 60, maybe these are the amount of calories that we should be having. So if, let's say we're an average exerciser, then we should have about 1,800 calories a day. That's a daily calorie of what you can have. It tells you what foods to avoid. We've been talking about this the last half hour, and what foods that you can have, indicated by the green check marks and the X's up there. And again, when you read the labels, I mentioned this earlier in the top right corner, most people don't care about that. You know, in the last couple of decades, there have been a lot of administrative initiatives that said, we're going to put those labels first thing right on there. Just like, for example, with the smoking phenomena from back then, when they had to actually put the label on there, it says this may be unhealthy for our death, right, or may kill you. And, you know, the tobacco industry was furious. They're like, no, you can't do that. But what's happened over time, yes, we don't see as many people smoking. That's true. But food's different, I think, because food, even though in the last 20-some years, when you go to a restaurant or when you go anywhere, usually even fast food restaurants will have the calories up there. Most people are not deterred by that, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like, well, I don't want to know. Don't tell me how much that cheeseburger has in it. You know, although the point of it is, like, not only should it scare us to say, well, gosh, I don't want to have that, but also to keep us in check. If we're like, well, I'm only supposed to have 1,800 calories a day, what am I allowed to have? And that kind of doesn't restrict you, but it just kind of keeps you in check, keeps you in balance. Okay. This is the axes that I was talking about earlier. If we get nothing else from today, these are the 3 big points that I wanted to talk about. Okay, so just hang tight with me here for a second. This is directly from Dr. Peter Attia, and this guy, I've recently discovered him. He's just amazing. He's and I'll have his website up because I want to give him a lot of credit for this. But I was recently discovering this medical doctor where he pulled up an XYZ axis, and think of these as levers, by the way. Okay, so for example, for short, CRDRTR. Well, what does that mean? This goes to what your goals are. Okay, this is my challenge to you. I mentioned it earlier. I said quantity, quality, timing. This is that picture right here. Well, we have quantity, CR, meaning restricting the quantity that you're consuming, quote, how much you eat. Okay, then you have TR, which is restricting the timing of meals when you eat. And then you have DR, restricting the elements of diet, quote, what we eat. Okay, why is that important? Because I mentioned earlier that there are 5 really key, good, empirically research data-based diets I'm going to leave you with, and I'll put the list up there, and they all have something in common. They have these 3 components right here. You'll always see, for example, you know, any diet that's come up over time, when they say, well, as long as you stick with this diet, but make sure you don't eat past those, you know, carbs past 6 p.m. at night, or make sure that you're not consuming more than, you know, the amount that you're supposed to have for your daily allotted calorie intake, and make sure that you're sticking with this diet. It has to be this quality of diet. Well, you'll usually see that in those 3, again, common shared components in all major diets. And so what the goals are here is what we're talking about is, it says pull because it's saying they're levers, saying pull one of them, because again, most of Americans, and that reason why we have 2/3 overweight and almost 40% now morbidly obese, is because we're not doing any of these at all. We're not doing any goals of those. If I was to not care about what time I'm going to eat and drink, and I wasn't paying attention to what I was eating or how much I was eating, that would be the American diet. That would be me. I would be doing what most people do in a day, and that's not good. So number 1, we should always, 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 my goal is to you, pull on one of those levers. Say, you know what, this week I'm going to look at how much I'm eating. I don't even know how many calories I've been eating in a day. I'm going to start it today. I'm going to do it now. There's a lot of apps and watches and smartphones that track that. And you could just look at that and say, I'm really going to take this seriously. Let's see how much I'm eating. I'm going to really have that and focus that on a goal. You should be doing that always once. Or if you're not doing that, then you should do one of the other 2 things. You should either be looking at, again, the type of food that you're eating. And here's an example. Okay, I know that I shouldn't be eating carbs and saturated fats and sugars as my majority, like I've always been doing all my life. I'm going to change that. I'm going to look at that myplate.gov. I'm going to challenge myself and do half fruits and vegetables, a little bit of grains or carbs, and then a little bit of protein. I'm going to try that. I'm really going to focus. That's my one lever I'm going to pull that week. Or finally, the 3rd thing, restrictive timing. We're going to talk about that one, by the way, too, because that's another phenomenon that's happened over a period of time. Not only the fact of, well, we've always been taught, when should we have the biggest portion of our meals. We should be having that first thing in the morning, right? The whole saying, you should eat in the morning as a king, and then as a prince during lunch, and then a pauper at dinner, right? We've heard that, and there's a reason for that, because when we're up and about, we're burning those calories that we've consumed in the beginning of the day. And then as we progress to the later part of the day, most of us usually sit down, rest, relax, and we're getting ready to sleep. That's where our metabolism slows down. And if our basal metabolism decreases, then what's going to happen is that any food that we've had past a certain time is just going to sit there. Which is why, by the way, intermittent fasting is really good. That's one of the 5 that I'm talking about here, and I'll show you here in just a second. These are the ones that I was saying that, if anything, and again, I'm not a salesperson for any of them. I don't care. I mean, for me, I haven't even tried any of these, but for the most part, what I've done is I've taken an account and I've looked and seen recently, over the years, over the past decades of research, what are the ones that people have had the most success with. And by the way, I probably know, I'm sure I do, at least one or a couple of family members and clients of mine who have done one or most of these as well, too. You know, you have the DASH diet, the basically diet approach against you know, hypertension. You have your intermittent fasting, as I mentioned. The intermittent fasting component is something like, anybody in here ever done intermittent fasting or no? But okay, what it looks like is it's trying to have you and challenge you not eat for a very long period of time. Here's an example, an 18:6 ratio. There's 24 hours in a day. It tells you don't eat for 18 hours, only eat within 6 hours. So again, there's really good resources on this, and there's really effective reasons why that works too. And you can manipulate that. You could say, well, that's too long. Let me try a 17 to, you know, I can't add for 17:7 ratio. You know, you get the point of like saying, okay, I'm going to get up this morning and I'll eat at only 12 p.m. will be my first meal, but then 7 p.m. it stops. So that's the time during that compressed time between 12 to 7 that I've eaten on that example. And then we've heard of the low carb or AKA keto diet. That's basically staying really, really low on the carbs and really, really high on the proteins with some fat in there as well. Mediterranean diet, very clean, very similar to the one below it in terms of lots of vegetables and fruits and healthy. You know, the other thing that these have in common is it kind of emphasizes and reiterates what I've been talking about the whole time in terms of not having all of those evil preservatives, sodium, you know, again, even a meatless burger. Look at the sodium on that too. That's another issue to look at nowadays, is that you could say, well, I'm not as bad as, you know, that's not necessarily true. We have to be careful with the sodium and everything else that we're having. So again, I think that it's so important to just keep in mind that there are really, really good resources out there. Putting this presentation together, I stuck with what I felt was the most empirically best listed resources that are up here. And, you know, again, that's who I pretty much go and get my information from. So just to conclude and wrap this up, and then we're going to leave this to Q&A for a second. If there were 3 things that I wanted to leave you with, and again, I mentioned earlier, repetition's mode of learning, and so forth. Let's focus on the amount of food that we're consuming in a day, okay? Let's focus on what quality and what type of food that looks like, or that diet, so to speak. And let's look at the timing. Can we challenge ourselves on all 3 of those and do a better job of really paying attention? Because again, it comes down to behavior modification, and that's what change is. It takes roughly, they say, 30 days to develop a habit, and especially a healthy one if you stick to it. And again, I want to throw in their exercise, of course, because exercise is important. It goes along with the component that it's very vital to do this not only alone. If you need a friend or a workout buddy or someone to keep you accountable, then I encourage you to do that. I think this place I overheard has classes here. I think that's a great idea. There's a lot of free information on YouTube and on the internet that you can go on and just search and look at. And you know, have someone keep you accountable and even join groups. I mentioned it earlier. If we're really struggling, we know somebody who's having issues and problems, there are resources out there to help those people in terms of, you know, again, behavioral therapy and any types of professional help that they can seek from either their medical professional or from a registered dietitian. So with that, I wanted to make sure that I left a few minutes here for us kind of to have a dialogue. Are there any questions at this point up to here? And by the way, if there are, I'm going to call on you first, please. When you ask the question, I'm going to repeat it because I believe it's being recorded, so I want to make sure anybody who's listening in, they can hear the question, and for the benefit of everybody else in the room too. So please, yes.
So do you have it as clinic or do you have business card?
Oh, myself. Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah. So no, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD actually of exercise psychology, and yes, I do have a business card. So if anybody didn't get one of these, then I'd love to give you my information. So I've got, who needs a business card, and I'll give you one of these too. Yeah, let me give you the information. If anybody else needs it too, there's my card. Oh, please do. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, I'm handing out my card and flyers to everybody. Okay, you got it, and you've got it as well. Oh, okay, perfect. Let me give you one of these. Anybody else need one? Or I've got more at the table on your way out as well too, if we need them. Yeah, I encourage you to definitely go on the website and check out some information, because I do video blogs as well. I interview other nutritionists, personal trainers, and exercise professionals. I'd be happy to share that information with you. So if you go to my website, there's something that has a tab that says video blogs at the top. You can click on that and see some more information. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Is there any special time at night you say, just off the top of your head, not to eat like 6 o'clock, don't eat after 6?
Yeah, good question. So the question was, is there any time specifically at night that maybe we should be thinking about not eating after? Very good question. So as far as types of food to eat after, let's say 6 p.m., because that's a good time, because most people are settling in and ready, then we definitely would want to avoid carbs and starches and fats. If you have something like, well, I'm really hungry, I'm not going to go to bed starving, that's fine. Get a nice good lean chicken breast or fish, something that's baked or steamed, something that's healthy, like a healthy protein or a vegetable. That would be totally fine, like a sweet potato, no problem. Even a salad, that's okay. But keeping in mind, that is still calories that we're having. So, again, if we can, we theoretically want to have that a little earlier. But if you have to, then a good, again, nice, healthy, lean protein or vegetable would be preferable. Mm-hmm.
What I do, blender was a smoothie maker, and then I put it in a container, and then after 6 you kind of want something, then I kind of lay it in the counter for a few minutes, and then dig in, because it's healthy.
Mm-hmm. That's good, yeah.
Nothing really,
Yeah.
The smoothie all is healthy.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good with what you do. I pretty much follow, but I don't understand that. Why have to you starve yourself for 12 hours? I never think I could wait next. Because the morning I eat usually about 10 around egg and avocado and then bread, gluten-free. Then before 12 I have a light lunch. Then I have dinner at 5:30 before 6. So between that I would have healthy snack like skinny popcorn. Things like that. Then I have a lot of fruits and vegetables. But I mean, you have to be real cautious with that. And then right after pandemic early this year, that I was so proud of myself, not going out to eat and not, it was the people. So I was twice a week, lunch and one supper. Oh my God, I was at a cholesterol went roof. In April I didn't take any medicine right now at this point. I don't take any. But my cholesterol went up the roof. So Dr. Anders gave to me that medicine, whatever. I haven't taken one, but I was a very strict diet. Not go out to eat, and no, even bread. I put it in with a fry pan, kind of was a kind of crispy a little bit. It's in the freezer. So defrost, and then I do that, and put it in avocado the spread, and then put it in oil at the top of it. That's my usual practice.
Yeah, those are really good examples that you said about the smoothie and even the bread at the end too, with kind of making it taste better. And so in your summary of the way you're eating, that is a good illustration of you said the word consistent. Most people have an issue and a problem with what she just mentioned in terms of staying accountable and keeping consistency on that. Because like anything else, if you're going to be successful, you need to keep doing it that way. And it's really hard. I mean, it's a real battle.
But Saturday I have sweets, either pizza, I will go for bigger one, right? Then either a chocolate bar. I asked one time, what about the sugar-free? Well, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference because alcohol, whatever. So eat the whole bar, get rid of beer, add that. So after Saturday is my sweet day. And I eat one thing, either chocolate or cake or something. Stage after that. So in my mind, doing that, I'm pretty good with that. I think. The reason I came, I want to make sure what I did right.
Yeah, absolutely. It reaffirms it. Yeah, it validates it.
I have a bigger problem. I take breakfast between 12 and 1, lunch 5 and 6. And 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, I have to get something to eat before I can go to bed. I can't break out of that habit.
Okay, so you go to bed very late.
Wake up late, go to bed late.
Okay.
That's how I used to work.
Because of your work schedule. Yeah, yeah.
Break that work schedule.
As long as you're feel like you're getting enough sleep, and as long as you feel energized during the day, if you feel that again that because your work schedule, because you're previously feeling like I'm stuck in the same way of sleeping late and sleeping in. If that works for you, then I don't think there's a problem with just adjusting your time later, because that's no different than someone who's getting up earlier, right, exactly. So I'm generally just saying that most people, if we're sleeping at 9 or 10 at night, then 6 p.m. But in your case, if you are moving those times later, I don't see a problem with that at all, as long as you're doing everything else that we've been talking about and avoiding. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's good. I think that's great. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any diets that focus on you going the other way, gaining weight? Because that's all.
The question was, are there any diets that are the opposite? Well, I've been talking about the last 45 minutes now. Yeah, are there diets where you can gain weight? Good question. And yes, actually, if you pull that lever the other way of the consumption and eat more calories, that would be beneficial for you then, okay? I've been personal training for about 25 years now. 90% of, maybe even more, 95% of the clients I've ever met, they always come up to me and they say, I need to lose weight. I need to lose body fat. I very rarely have people saying, what can I do to put on some pounds? Because again, you could look at, I'm sure you've been told this. I'm sure that people would say, I'd kill to have your problem. I wish that and so, but in all seriousness, yes, you want to look at that lever of eating more. And again, staying on the good quality, okay? But eating more and also eating more protein for you because you're looking to get leaner muscle mass, not necessarily bulk up and not necessarily gain body fat. But in your case, if someone's trying to gain weight, you want to eat more protein, and also you want to, like she was saying, eating frequently during the day so that you're getting enough calories. You want to break it up. And so in your case, you wouldn't have to worry about the intermittent fasting, for example. That would not be something that you'd have to stay, adhered to. But for you, in your case, if I was trying to gain weight, I'd want to, and I had this issue. I wear the same size that I wore when I was in college as far as like shirts and clothing and pants. But again, I had the same problem though. I was it's rare because, I was a wrestler and I was trying to put on muscle mass. And I remember that one of my advisors I worked with, he was a big guy, real tall, big, muscular. And I was like, how do I get to even look like a fraction like you? What can I do? I mean, I'm a toothpick. I was 149 pounds when I left high school, and I was probably the same height. And he told me, he was very smart. He said, you just need to eat like a horse. He was like, you need to eat like, how many calories are you getting in a day? I was like, I don't know, maybe 2,000. He said, you need 6,000, 8,000 calories. And he was serious. And, as long as you're physically activity, working out and exercising and walking, you can burn those calories. But my thing to tell you, that's why I told you the consumption. Whatever you're eating right now, just try to eat more of, and just try to have that, those calories that you can get in, because that's hard. That's if not, more challenging than what we're talking about here with weight loss. So it is. It's very, very hard.
Maybe she can have when you're making that egg for what is that called? Square egg without the egg yolk, maybe 1 or 2. They put a lot of whites. What do you think?
Yeah, so the suggestion was like more egg whites and like say an egg scrambled or omelet. Yeah, I think that's good because then you're avoiding the cholesterol. That's easy. That's something that you can do healthier to get more protein in, and I think that's a good example. And cheap too. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Affordable, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So that would be good. But no, these are excellent. You gave some excellent feedback. And by the way, I want to make sure that you get a gift from me on the way out of here. As I mentioned, I'm really big on empirical peer-reviewed information. This is a peer-reviewed journal that I had published last year. I wrote this with some colleagues. And this, so we talked everything about nutrition in the last hour. Well, this is your gift / homework. You can take this home and learn all about exercising and how to stay motivated to working out, because that's so important and crucial, right? The Journal of Performance Psychology talks about the behavior modification. My pleasure. And why it's so important to work out and what are the benefits. So again, this is a study, and this was a study done a couple years ago. It basically is the shortened version of my dissertation that I did in my PhD schooling. And you can learn about when you have a sample of a certain number of people, how they're motivated to exercise. And a big component of it is what's called relatedness, meaning what I talked about earlier in the presentation, support, working out and teaming with other people. And that's the kind of the foundation of that journal that I just handed to you. So, I thought okay, yes, yeah, okay.
Do you suggest when you exercise doing, like say I do certain exercise on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then I try to walk every morning. Do you suggest doing different exercises like in between, like weight training? Or?
Yeah, so that's a good example. The question was, do you suggest, are there other supplemental exercises I can do if I'm, for example, working out Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Should I be doing something on Tuesday and Thursday? And yes, the answer would be absolutely. Every day you want to look at how many calories can I burn in a day. That's your goal, because we talked about the consumption of calories that we have, but you also need to look on the flip side, how many calories we're burning. If our goal is to lose weight, then we want to keep in mind that I'm doing a great job on my Monday, Wednesday, Friday routine. Well, Tuesday and Thursday, I should probably then be stepping it up with something different, some type of interval training, for example, because I'm doing strength training. And these days, I can supplement that with cross training and doing some type of, let's say, elliptical or power walking, swimming, the group classes that they offer. So my answer would be a big, huge yes with a capital Y and an exclamation mark, saying yes, absolutely, definitely. Every single day, try to figure out what we can do in terms, and that's for whether or not we're trying to lose weight or gain weight, is that we need to be working out and doing something physical every single day, for sure.
Do you recommend the average pound per age?
Can you repeat the question, please? The average
pound per weight, per age. Let's say I'm 50.
How
much do you expect you to have? 160?
Okay, well, so for example, the question was, how much should I weigh for my own specific, age? And that is going to be determined upon your body mass index. And that's going to be something where if you look at your age, because again, we know that we gain, right, exactly, we shrink in height, but we also gain weight as we age. I would say to you that for a 50-year-old woman who is 160 pounds would be probably somewhere in an average body mass index. That would be okay. So then a goal would be like, okay, then I can try to lose 5 to 10 pounds as a long-term goal. That would be, because again, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We want to do this over a long period of time. And how much weight can I lose for the rest of my life? Since again, I said it's not a diet per se, but it's more of a lifestyle change that you're doing. So your goal would be to say, well, I've got 5 to 10 pounds to lose for X amount of years. And then once you gain, and I shouldn't say gain, you achieve your goal, I should say, of that weight loss for that example, then you can just maintain from there and just say, I'm happy with this weight. I'm going to stick with this. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
What would my weight be? I'm 79 years old, 5'4", and I weigh 157 pounds.
Oh, really? That's not bad at all. Yeah. So, so you said 5'4" and 157 pounds. So in your case then for a BMI, I would just say that's not bad. I would just, same thing I mentioned, maybe look for the 5 pounds.
No,
Yeah.
you calculated wrong. 135.
That's your goal is 135 pounds. Okay.
37, and I really struggle with the pants.
Yeah.
I wear this reason for that.
It's always, yeah. That's good. No, I like that. Yeah, that's aggressive. You know, 135, that's a very aggressive goal, and I would say, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you're right. Okay, well, thank you so much. We're right at time, so I want to appreciate you coming in and keep up the great work and keep doing well. Keep doing everything that you're doing, so keep it up. My pleasure. Thank you.